Good evening, folks. It's your resident ooky spooky girly Alexa. I'm back today to talk yet again about alien life. I think it would be pretty selfish of us to assume that life on Earth is the only sentient life in the entire galaxy, with so much still unexplored by our technology. Weird beings from the sky have been spotted since the beginning of time, but their descriptions have differed so much that it's fascinating to imagine how many different societies and species live out there in the great unknown. What's even more interesting to me personally is just how much the government tries to make us believe otherwise when we have the stories and proof that alien life exists. Welcome to the top 5 unsettling evidence of alien life the Pentagon is hiding from you. In 5th place, we have the Roswell Coverup. Yes, I know I often reference Roswell when I talk about aliens and UFOs, but so much can be credited back to that historic summer. Retired NSA specialist William Sells of Noblesville, Indiana, claims that his uncle, Wayne Shell, had been a personal bodyguard to President Harry Truman back in 1947. The two men went to Roswell at the insistence of President of the United States Truman in July after sneaking out of the White House disguised as press. Wayne said they met Major Easley at the crash site. Major Easley promised the president that none of the bodies from the crash would remain. The Secret Service instituted Operation Doppelganger and provided Harry Truman's double to make sure the press was unaware of Harry's real location. At first, William didn't believe his uncle, exactly, how any rational person would react, until the family opened his military footlocker in his bedroom after his passing around 1969. Inside were letters from FDR and Truman, along with glossy photos of the Yalta Conference with Churchill, Stalin, and FDR. So, where did all the bodies go? That's what I would like to know. In 4th place, we have a gray alien abduction. Grant Rollins, a resident of suburban Maryland, describes himself as a fairly normal bachelor, living in peace until this all went down in December of 2017. He woke up at 1:30 a.m. to the sound of a break-in and went to the bedroom door to confront the intruder, but was suddenly rendered unconscious as he touched the doorknob. Okay, so someone brave. I would have been cowering under the blankets or like in my closet. He woke up naked and cold in a pill-shaped glass container. The lid was open, so he was able to stumble out onto the floor that was near the container. He described feeling sluggish and barely able to walk, but he thought he'd been kidnapped, so he was urgently trying to find an escape route. The room he was in was made of mostly concrete and plastic with fluorescent lights. He managed to limp into a hallway that was tunnel-shaped and followed a blue glow coming from down the hall. As he walked, he came out of the tunnel and entered a large cylindrical room lined with vehicles on hooks along the walls. They were human vehicles, mostly Japanese and German cars and motorcycles, but some vehicles were clearly from the American military. That's one way to store a collection. In the center of the room was what looked like a metal tree that was 6 stories tall with glowing blue leaves. As Grant stumbled closer, he realized this tree was a large metal cylinder and the leaves were capsules similar to the one he'd woken up in, except these still had people inside of them and were radiating a neon blue glow. As he paid more attention to higher up in this tree, Grant noticed some blue wires moving around in the dark area towards the ceiling. These clumps of wires suddenly floated down towards him and turned to reveal that they had faces in them, each with 2 large dark eyes and narrow slits for noses and mouth. He's compared them in appearance to the typical gray alien face from popular media, with 2 of the faces frowning and 1 smiling. There was an exchange of words and charades between himself and the smiling one for roughly 10 minutes, but he was so exhausted and they were so advanced that no important information was shared between them. Too bad. He passed out once again, waking up later face down in a puddle of his own drool on a glass floor. Gross. He was too tired to get up and was barely able to tilt his head up, just enough to take a look around. The room was apparently circular, about 150 square feet in size, and a bright, sterile white color. One of the tentacled creatures was in the room, but was busy facing away and operating a set of strange controls with no buttons or levers. Out of exhaustion, Grant's head fell back down, and through the glass floor saw that they had risen out of a deep black hole that was dug into a grassy field, where a rock-shaped lid closed around the hole to cover it. This is when he realized he was in a spacecraft and had actually been in a silo of some sort that's here on Earth. Grant passed out for the last time and was awoken by the sensation of being dropped onto his bed with a hard thud. He checked his phone for the time and saw that it was 6:30 in the morning. Later that day, he found an object that had been inserted and cauterized into his right leg and experienced a run-in with some men in black suits within 4 days of the abduction. Grant claims that he never believed in abductions or UFOs or men in black, any of that. But now he doesn't have a choice in the matter and is annoyed that there's no official place to get legitimate information information or help on the subject. I'm hoping that after talking about this, I don't see any men in black on my way home today. In third place, we have an Air Force landing cover-up. Quinn Nelson, who wants his location to stay private out of fear for his safety, knew a girl whose dad was stationed at an Air Force base in his state. At the time, there were 2 Air Force bases and 1 Marine Air Station in that state, so he feels comfortable making this story known. Quinn said he went to see the girl and stay with her family over a weekend, arriving on the Friday, just in time for family dinner. He and the girl decided to walk over to the base movie theater afterwards to enjoy some private time. And after the movie was done, they were walking back to the family's quarters in the company of many Air Force kids and families who also saw the movie. He said that as they were walking, Air Force Air Police personnel began driving down the base housing streets, ordering the theater goers to the nearest base housing residence. A siren or tone was wailing from somewhere, along with a code being repeated that Quinn refuses to name. The crowd didn't put up any kind of resistance and began moving when they were directed, as if this was a normal occurrence. Something Quinn observed as being weird to him, but hey, he wasn't going to be the only one to put up a fuss. When the group he was walking with arrived at a house, his girlfriend, without knocking, pushed the door open and they all walked in. Quinn said the members of the household were pulling the window drapes closed, sending out folding chairs, offering water, acting like this was a planned gathering instead of some random occurrence. Around an hour or so later, the air police again went up and down the streets, giving the all clear, and somewhere the same siren or tone was sounding. Later that night, his girlfriend's family told him that he must never tell anyone about what had happened on the base, saying that this is what happens when UFOs would land on base property or nearby, something that was apparently very common on Air Force bases. Anyone want to let me know in the comments section if that's true? Consider me intrigued. In second place, we have lizard beings from Colorado. Back in 1968, Hannah and her family were living in a small town around the west end of Montrose County called Uravan, Colorado. One early summer morning, she was awoken by the barking of the family dog named Tippy outside of her bedroom window, which was unusual for the pup, who usually only barked when someone or something was in a yard that they weren't supposed to be. Hannah remembers waking out of a deep sleep and hearing Tippy constantly barking and wondering why her older brother, who slept in the bunk above her, and her parents, who slept on the other side of the wall, weren't telling Tippy to quit it. Finally, Hannah was fed up and decided to turn over in bed and look out the window, and was met with a sight she didn't believe at first. There was a small circular ship with its landing gear down and hatch with stairs folded down to the ground. Next to the ship were green lizard-like beings with bright yellow eyes, webbed hands that resembled a bow and arrow, and some had tanks on their backs. They had thin bodies, were covered in scales, and had V-shaped toes. According to Hannah, the overall mood was that these beings were searching for something, but she had no idea as to what. Another alien exited the ship, but it was much larger in size than the others, and seemed to be the one giving out orders. This caused Tippy to begin barking aggressively once again, upsetting the aliens who began to approach the dog. Hannah instinctively jumped off her bed and rushed into her parents' room in an attempt to wake her mom, but struggled. Her mom slept as if she was completely out of it, and when she finally awoke, was incredibly sluggish in movement. Hannah explained what was going on outdoors and her concern for Tippy, but the mom was unable to see the creatures, wanting only to go back to sleep. Speaking from experience, my dad would have been the same way if I tried to wake him up. Trust me. Hannah's mom eventually told her to sleep away from the window, and before she fell back to sleep, she remembers seeing 2 of the lizard beings looking in her room through the window, and no longer hearing any noise from Tippy. When morning came, Hannah rushed outdoors in her PJs to check on the beloved pet, and Tippy was waiting around like nothing had happened. The occurrence was never discussed between Hannah and her mom again until shortly before her mom's passing in 2016, when she asked Hannah if she remembered seeing the lizard people and their ship back in the yard in Colorado. Creepy. In first place, we have the Voronezhsky Abduction. I tried. I promise I tried. 34-year-old Vladimir and his 29-year-old wife Olga were at home with their 1.5-year-old son Arthur and their daughters Vanessa and Angelica. Olga had asked their daughters to run an errand, and while returning home, both girls saw an unusual object in the sky, so they rushed home and told their family that they had seen a flying star. Olga told them that it had most likely been a satellite or a plane, but the girls objected and explained that the object had been round, with strange white, yellow, and red flashing lights around its perimeter. Both girls then drew a picture of what they had seen, and despite the fact that they went to different rooms to sketch, both drawings were very similar. The girls then insisted that their parents go outside to look at the sky. Olga and Vladimir saw a distant hovering object in the sky that seemed to move and change shapes. Olga managed to take a photo of the object with her cell phone, but the photo only showed a yellow spot or elongated strip with a black background. The family went back inside, had supper, and went to bed. And while I would love to end this here, y'all know better about how this is about to go. Around 2 a.m., Vladimir suddenly awoke and saw that the whole room was lit by a whitish violet light and tried to wake Olga, who refused to wake up, so he went back to sleep. And seeing as it was 2 in the morning, I would have done the same. The bright lights woke up their youngest daughter, Angelica, who ran to wake her mother. Olga then woke up, saw what the other two had seen, and woke Vladimir back up. He was amazed to see that the ceiling of the room had apparently disappeared or had become totally transparent. Right over them, instead of the ceiling, they could see the open sky and a huge disc-shaped craft hovering right above. Vladimir and Olga ran outside their home, still in their PJs, and could see a hovering disc-shaped UFO emitting the strong lights around 100 feet away. Olga began floating, zooming upwards in a spiral motion, and when Vladimir tried grabbing her legs, he discovered he couldn't control his body. Olga described feeling nauseous, unable to control her body as well. In a state of shock, the couple found themselves teleported inside a room with transparent walls and no furniture. Moments later, the duo witnessed 12 entities enter. The humanoids were short, around 4 feet tall. They had 3 fingers on each hand and large heads with smooth gray skin. Vladimir didn't notice any mouths, noses, or ears on them, but noticed their large, black, pupilless eyes. The entities had no visible legs and were moving around like caterpillars. They wore a completely sealed, tight-fitting coverall with masks and hoods that covered their bodies. Only one of the aliens was taller from the rest, easily over 6 feet tall, and stood behind the other small humanoids, with his face not being visible under his outfit. The short entities approached Olga first, placing her in a deep armchair that resembled a gynecologist's chair, prompting Vladimir, who was now unfrozen, to attempt to rush towards her when he ran into an invisible wall or force field. 2 of the aliens approached him, and he asked what was going on, and they reassured him telepathically that you will soon be back home. Vladimir rightfully became angry and attempted to push the aliens away, but was thwarted by more entities grabbing him in an attempt to restrain him. The aliens asked him why he resisted, staring straight into his eyes each time they communicated telepathically, before inserting 4 metal rods into his chest area, paralyzing him completely. So from that moment on, he was unable to move and could only stand there helplessly and watch the aliens experiment on Olga. Somehow, they were able to cut into her stomach without her noticing or using any kind of known surgical instruments. She sensed the smell of her inner organs, feeling unpleasant but no pain, only tranquility and relaxation. Modern human medicine could apparently stand to learn a thing or two. The aliens seemed to be taking samples from her body and organs, and apparently were now using different instruments to study the organs inside her abdomen. Olga was only able to describe one that looked like a pair of pincers and had 3 clamps. After the strange procedures, the aliens closed and sewed up her stomach. Now, before the abduction, Olga had been bothered by stomach pains, and after the abduction, she never suffered from them ever again. The smaller humanoids respectfully called the taller humanoid by a word that Vladimir has loosely translated as the professor, who explained to Vladimir that their society was like a huge ant colony. After Vladimir was brought in front of the professor, he asked the entity why they had taken him and his wife, with the taller being answering that it had to be done. Both witnesses understood that having such feelings was the central interest of the aliens. The tall alien said, "We do not understand you. Why haven't you, intelligent animals, destroyed yourselves yet? How can you survive with your emotions?" He said that there was a space war going on at this time in the universe, and that the entity that you call God has implanted much information to Earth and into the waters of it. Those who are against God want that information destroyed. If the Earth is going to be destroyed, the Son of God would arrive to Earth again and will restore everything living in it. Through the transparent surface of the cabin, the duo could see planet Earth approaching and felt that their spacecraft was slowing down. The couple was then returned back to Earth the very same way they were abducted. First in the smaller module, and then this large disc-shaped craft, and then through the roof of their home inside a beam of light. At 11 a.m. the next morning, Vladimir and his wife Olga awoke, and a while passed before they talked about what had occurred. But after analyzing the mutual identical memories, they understood what had happened had not been a dream, but reality. The whole family underwent extensive medical tests to see if the aliens had left behind any implants to try to find some traces of surgery. By some mysterious manner, Vladimir lost his gray hairs, and his physical powers of endurance increased after the abduction. Olga was cured of her chronic colitis and gained the ability to make a drunken man sober by placing the palm of her head on a man's forehead for 2 to 3 minutes. That's a pretty neat ability, but I'm not sure I want to undergo testing for it. And that brings me to the end of our list and a stronger belief in the unknown. Be sure to let me know in the comments if you're a believer, what else the Pentagon might be keeping from us, and as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more unsettling content from us here at Top 5 Scary Videos. Stay weird, folks.